Before diving into the video, did you know that over 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed? Your one like and one subscribe means the absolute world to this channel and helps us keep going. Hit those buttons real quick and let's get into the video. Chapter 1. The Heartless Agreement. At the dinner table, Victoria pushed a thin set of divorce papers across the polished marble. Her deep eyes lingered on her husband, Lucas, for a long while before she finally spoke in a cool, matter-of-fact tone. She explained that her first love, Marcus, had recently returned from overseas feeling humiliated by his wealthy ex-wife. To help Marcus regain his confidence and save face, Victoria claimed she needed to put on a grand public show. She would temporarily marry Marcus to help him humiliate his ex, which meant she and Lucas needed to finalize a quick divorce first. After the situation with Marcus is sorted out, we can remarry, she added smoothly. Before she could even finish her sentence, Lucas took the divorce papers, picked up a pen, and signed his name on every line without glancing at the terms. He tossed the pen aside and casually uncorked a bottle of red wine, pouring himself a glass. Seeing his utter indifference, Victoria raised an eyebrow in surprise, searching his face for any sign of hurt. "You're not jealous?" she asked, almost disappointed. Lucas took a slow sip of the wine, entirely unconcerned. He felt no jealousy, only a profound sense of relief. During their 7 years of marriage, he had survived on a stingy monthly allowance of $5,000 while performing every piece of backbreaking labor at her company and managing their entire household. Just a month prior, when he fell ill with a high fever and asked for an advance of $10,000 to cover medical bills, Victoria had exploded at him, accusing him of being wasteful and secretly maintaining another woman. Yet 2 days ago, when Marcus returned, Victoria spent millions throwing a lavish welcome banquet and handed Marcus $10 million in spending money without batting an eye. When they were in college, Victoria came from an impoverished background. Lucas had worked multiple part-time jobs every day to pay her tuition and living expenses. Every line of success she held today was built on his back, yet she was now taking their marital assets to spoil her ex-boyfriend. Fortunately, to ensure the divorce went without a hitch, Victoria had transferred all major marital property and houses to Lucas's name. She believed this generous gesture would secure his trust, completely unaware that Lucas was planning to take the assets, retire early, and cut her out of his life forever. Chapter 2. The Unwanted Feast. Pleased with how effortlessly she had secured the signed papers, Victoria was in an unusually generous mood. She picked up her chopsticks and placed a heavy serving of cooked spinach on Lucas's plate, smiling warmly. "I still remember spinach is your favorite," she said softly. "I specifically learned how to cook it for you." Lucas looked at the bright green leaves on his plate in disbelief. He was severely allergic to spinach, a fact that had landed him in the emergency room during their first year together with severe hives and gastrointestinal bleeding. Back then, he had eaten it to avoid disappointing her, and she had cried at his bedside for days. But over time, as Marcus re-entered her mind, her memories had rewritten themselves. Spinach was actually Marcus's favorite dish, and she had completely forgotten that serving it to Lucas could literally poison him. Before Lucas could say a word, the doorbell rang. Victoria's eyes lit up instantly. Forgetting Lucas entirely, she practically skipped to the door, opening it to welcome Marcus. "Marcus, come in. Treat this place like your own home," she gushed. Marcus walked in carrying an elegant box from an upscale bakery. He looked at Lucas with a feigned expression of polite awkwardness. "If I had known Lucas was home, I would have brought another gift." Victoria immediately brushed it off, pulling Marcus by the arm toward the dining table, which was covered in dishes Lucas couldn't eat. It suddenly hit Lucas that this romantic dinner had never been prepared for him in the first place. Marcus presented the bakery box, a rich cream cake. Victoria gasped with delight, taking a large bite. Watching her eat happily, Lucas let out a bitter, silent laugh. A few months ago, he had bought her the exact same cream cake as a surprise, only to be harshly berated for half an hour. She had accused him of trying to trigger her high blood sugar and ruin her health to steal her property. Yet now, receiving it from Marcus, her blood sugar was suddenly no longer a concern. Chapter 3. The Illusory Promises. As Victoria fussed over Marcus, piling food onto his plate and giggling at his old stories. She occasionally threw a patronizing glance toward Lucas. "Don't worry, Lucas," she said casually between bites. "As soon as we help Marcus handle his situation, we will remarry right away." Lucas said nothing. He quietly pushed the plate of spinach away and poured himself another glass of wine, knowing in his heart that there would be no remarriage. Looking at Victoria, he couldn't help but recall how their relationship began. For 3 years in college, he had secretly loved her, quietly protecting her from afar, bringing her warm breakfast every morning, and walking behind her in the dark to ensure she got home safely from her night shifts. When Marcus abandoned her to go abroad, Victoria got thoroughly drunk and begged Lucas to marry her, promising to forget Marcus forever and devote herself to him. For 7 years of marriage, Lucas had poured his entire soul into helping her build her corporate empire, asking for no shares, no public recognition, and remaining an invisible husband outside the office. Yet despite a decade of quiet devotion, he remained second best to a man who had walked away. After dinner, Victoria put on a stunning red dress and touched up her makeup. "Something came up at the office," she announced cheerfully to Lucas, leaning into Marcus. "I need to pull an all-nighter with Marcus to review some files, so don't wait up for me." Without waiting for his answer, she left arm in arm with Marcus. Once they were gone, Lucas quietly cooked himself a simple bowl of noodles. As he ate, his phone buzzed repeatedly. Marcus was sending him video clips and photos of him and Victoria at an arcade, playing claw machines and laughing like teenagers. Years ago, Lucas had asked Victoria to spend a fun weekend afternoon with him at an arcade, but she had snapped at him, calling him childish and unmotivated, telling him to work more overtime instead. Later, he overheard her telling her friends that he was a dull, boring man. He now understood that she wasn't against arcades. She just didn't love him. Chapter 4. The Bureau and the Bun. The following morning at 9 a.m., they were scheduled to finalize their divorce at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Knowing Victoria was notoriously late for everything involving him, often keeping him waiting for hours, Lucas intentionally arrived 30 minutes late. To his surprise, Victoria was already standing outside the entrance, impeccably dressed and wearing glowing makeup. In all 7 years of marriage, including their own honeymoon, he had never seen her look so radiant or punctual. Usually, if he was a minute late, she would lecture him sternly on punctuality and time management. Today, however, she didn't scold him at all. Instead, she jogged over with a bright smile, linked her arm through his, and handed him a crumpled paper bag. "Did you eat breakfast? I brought you a pork and mushroom bun." Lucas glanced into the bag at the lukewarm, squished bun. He instantly recognized the packaging from the hotel breakfast Marcus posted on his story an hour prior. It was a leftover piece Marcus hadn't finished. "Let's just get the divorce done," Lucas said coldly, stepping away from her touch. Victoria's smile flickered, replaced by a flash of irritation. She tossed the paper bag straight into a nearby trash bin with a sharp humph. Inside the hall, the process was quick. Victoria was impatient and distracted while signing the divorce papers with Lucas, eager to get it over with. The moment their divorce certificate was handed to them, she immediately pulled Marcus forward and submitted their application to register her marriage with Marcus on the spot. As they received their new marriage license, Victoria's laughter filled the hall. Marcus proudly waved the red booklet in front of Lucas's face and wrapped an arm around Victoria's waist. "Don't worry, Lucas. I'll take good care of her while we work through this temporary period." Lucas looked at the red certificate in his own hand, completely unbothered. He informed Victoria that he was heading back to his rural hometown for a few weeks. Victoria fidgeted nervously, suddenly looking anxious. "I promised I'd go with you to visit your parents' graves, but something came up and I have to go on a business trip with Marcus. I can bring you back a souvenir if you want." "We are strangers now," Lucas replied quietly. "You don't need to explain anything to me." Chapter 5. Gravestones and Grievances. Lucas went straight to the company headquarters to submit his formal resignation, packed his belongings, and boarded a train to his family's village. For 7 years, Victoria had always found excuses to avoid visiting his parents' graves, claiming she was too busy running the business. Lucas cleared the weeds around the gravestones, burned paper money, and quietly talked to his deceased parents about his past decade, feeling a heavy weight finally lift from his chest. When he turned on his phone later that evening, it was flooded with messages. His former coworkers were bewildered by his sudden resignation, but the bulk of the notifications came from Marcus. Far from being on a business trip, Marcus was posting constant photo updates of a romantic beach vacation with Victoria. They wore matching couple outfits, held hands through crowded night markets, ate street food, and watched the sunset over the ocean. Every single romantic activity Lucas had begged Victoria to do with him over the years, all of which she had rejected as dirty, wasteful, or childish. Marcus captioned his social media posts, "The sweet taste of reliving our youth." Victoria posted scenic shots with the caption, "Still as beautiful as ever." She didn't realize Marcus had added Lucas on WeChat long ago to taunt him, believing Victoria was still hiding the affair to keep Lucas on the hook. Lucas simply muted the notifications and turned off his phone. A few days later, after returning to his apartment in the city, Lucas received a call from his former colleague, Daniel. Daniel was furious and poured out his grievances. The moment Lucas resigned, Victoria had appointed Marcus as the head project manager overseeing a massive $50 million residential contract. On his very first day, Marcus misread a client's core specifications and wrote the wrong corporate entity on the final contracts, causing the deal to collapse entirely. Instead of holding Marcus accountable, Victoria had publicly blamed Daniel and the rest of the team for not proofreading Marcus's work, screaming at them in the boardroom for half an hour. Furthermore, Daniel revealed that Marcus had started sourcing dangerously low-grade, cheap raw materials from unverified suppliers at inflated prices, intending to pocket the price difference as kickbacks. Lucas listened silently. Years ago, when the company was young, he had worked 2 straight days without sleep to secure a contract, only for Victoria to reprimand him severely in front of the entire staff because his tone during the presentation lacked energy. She had declared that no mistake, however small, was acceptable. Now, she was letting a fraud ruin the business out of pure blind affection. Knowing that substandard construction materials could put innocent people's lives at risk, Lucas collected the digital audit logs he still possessed from his time as manager and formally submitted an anonymous report to the Municipal Housing Authority and Economic Crime Division. Chapter 6. Beach Shells and Broken Ties. Late that night, as Lucas was preparing for bed, the front door unlocked. Victoria walked into the apartment, looking exhausted but acting as if nothing had changed. She placed a small, decorative box on the table, offering a coaxing smile. "Look what I brought you from the beach. I hand-picked these seashells for you. Do you like them?" Lucas glanced inside. The shells were misshapen, cracked, and gave off a faint, unpleasant odor. He recognized them immediately from a short video Marcus had sent him 2 days prior. In the video, Victoria and Marcus were walking along the shore. Whenever Victoria picked up an ugly or broken shell, Marcus told her to throw it away. Victoria had laughed and said, "Throwing them away is a waste. I'll take them back and give them to Lucas. It's the thought that counts, and it doesn't cost a dime." Looking at the woman who was now trying to play the devoted wife, Lucas felt only profound revulsion. He pushed the box away without a word. Victoria froze, her expression shifting to one of soft guilt. She stepped closer and wrapped her arms tightly around his waist from behind. "Are you still sad about your parents? Their passing was an accident. Lucas, don't keep dwelling on the past. At least you still have me." When he pulled away from her embrace, she pressed further, leaning against him on the bed. "Lucas, let's have a child. If we have a baby to carry on your family name, your parents can finally rest in peace." Lucas stared at her icy cold. In the 2nd year of their marriage, he had accidentally found a positive pregnancy test in the trash. Overjoyed, he had waited up all night to celebrate, only to be met by Victoria handing him medical papers confirming she had terminated the pregnancy. When he asked her why, she had exploded at him, shouting that having a child would ruin her body and destroy her blooming career, accusing him of trying to turn her into an exhausted housewife. Lucas had felt immense guilt back then, tending to her recovery with total care. It wasn't until years later that he discovered the truth. She hadn't aborted the baby for her career. She had done it because Marcus had sent his first letter from abroad saying he might come home. Now, she was offering him a child, as if it were a casual bargaining chip. Lucas sat up and walked toward the door. "I'm sleeping in the guest room." Victoria's patience snapped. She threw a heavy, decorative pillow hard against his back and shrieked, "Lucas, I'm giving you a way out here, so stop throwing a childish tantrum. If you won't touch me, plenty of other men will." Lucas didn't even pause. He walked into the guest room, shut the door, and turned the lock. Outside, Victoria paced furiously before dialing Marcus on speakerphone, intentionally raising her voice. "Marcus, I'm coming over to stay at your place tonight." Lucas pulled the blanket over his head and went to sleep peacefully. The next morning, he called a locksmith and replaced every lock on the front door. Chapter 7. Handcuffs and Accountability. At noon the following day, Victoria came storming back to the apartment, her eyes bloodshot. When her key failed to turn in the lock, she banged frantically on the door until Lucas opened it. "Why didn't you come looking for me last night?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Whenever we fought in the past, you always bought me flowers and apologized. Was everything you said about loving me forever just a lie?" Before Lucas could answer, the elevator doors behind her opened. For stern-looking police officers and corporate investigators stepped into the hallway. "Victoria?" the lead officer asked, pulling out an official warrant. "You are being detained under suspicion of major corporate fraud, tax evasion, and economic crimes related to the municipal housing project. Please come with us to the station." Victoria's face drained of all color. She stumbled backward, pointing a shaking finger at the officers. "What? There must be a mistake. I'm the CEO." Lucas stepped out onto the porch, his face completely serene. "There's no mistake, Victoria. I was the one who submitted the financial evidence to the authorities." Victoria stared at him in utter shock and fury. "Lucas, are you insane?" "Whether I am insane or not is none of your concern," Lucas replied evenly. "You should focus on answering the officers' questions." As the officers handcuffed her and led her away, Victoria glared back at him with pure venom. Unbothered, Lucas went back inside, closed the door, and spent the rest of the day outlining his new independent media business. 3 days later, the official preliminary investigation results were announced. It turned out that Marcus had used Victoria's corporate seal and authority to sign illegal kickback agreements with substandard material suppliers, pocketing tens of millions. Because Marcus had conducted every transaction under Victoria's legal name, Victoria was initially held criminally responsible. Marcus was formally arrested and detained in state custody, while Victoria was eventually released on bail after proving she was legally oblivious to the contract details. The very hour she was released, she called Lucas, her tone filled with arrogant condescension. "Well done, Lucas. I didn't know your jealousy could make you this ruthless. But using the police to get revenge on Marcus is crossing the line. Cutting corners on residential buildings can kill people if the structures collapse," Lucas said calmly. "And you talk as if it's just a game." "Listen to me," Victoria interrupted impatiently. "If you go to the police and claim that you were the one who signed off on those material purchases before you resigned, the charges against Marcus will be dropped. If you take the blame for this, I will overlook the fact that you reported me, and I will remarry you immediately." Lucas let out a genuine laugh. "You want me to take the fall for your lover and go to prison for years, just so I can have the privilege of remarrying you? Why are you acting like this?" Victoria snapped. Marcus was right. Men become arrogant the moment they get money and independence. I trusted you for 7 years, and look how quickly your heart changed. "You're right," Lucas said softly. "People change. Goodbye, Victoria." He hung up the phone. Chapter 8. The Desperate Frame-Up. Realizing Lucas would not comply, Victoria resorted to extreme measures. The following morning, her company launched an aggressive PR campaign across social media. They released edited documents framing Lucas as a disgruntled former executive who had purposefully authorized dangerous construction materials to sabotage the company before resigning out of spite. Within hours, the story exploded online. Doxing groups released Lucas's home address, and dozens of sensationalist reporters and live streamers swarmed his apartment building, blocking the entrance with cameras and microphones. Victoria called him, her voice sounding triumphant and relaxed over the noise of the reporters outside his window. "So, Lucas, have you realized your mistake yet? If you come back to me now and clear Marcus's name, I can make all these reporters go away." Lucas quietly drew his window curtains closed. What Victoria didn't know was that before submitting his initial report to the police, he had secured total digital backups of every email, voice note, and signed approval stamp proving that Marcus had personally negotiated the fraudulent supplier contracts long after Lucas had left the firm. Furthermore, he possessed recordings of Victoria explicitly overriding quality control warnings from senior engineers. Without hesitation, Lucas uploaded the full, unedited evidence folder to his newly created social media account, backed by formal legal statements from his attorney and Daniel. The truth dropped like an atomic bomb. The public's anger shifted instantly from Lucas to Victoria and Marcus. Outraged citizens flooded the company's public portals, demanding total accountability. The board of directors held an emergency meeting that afternoon. Facing total financial ruin and public boycott, the shareholders unanimously voted to strip Victoria of her CEO title, firing her from the company she had spent a decade building. That evening, a disheveled Victoria forced her way into Lucas's apartment when he opened the door to collect a delivery. "Now both of us are ruined," she screamed, her eyes wild. "Are you happy now?" Lucas poured himself a glass of water, entirely unfazed. "You are ruined. I, on the other hand, just gained 300,000 followers on my new channel because of the publicity." Victoria's posture collapsed, and her tone suddenly shifted from anger to desperate begging. "Lucas, I only authorized those statements because I wanted you to come back to me. I wanted you to need me again, the way you used to. I really do love you. I never wanted to destroy you." "You didn't love me," Lucas said coldly. "You loved having an obedient servant who paid your bills and expected nothing in return." Victoria burst into tears, grabbing his hands. Marcus is pitiful, Lucas. His parents forced him abroad years ago, and his ex-wife abused him. He only broke the law because he wanted to prove himself. You've had a much easier, happier life than him. So, what if you spent a few years in prison for him? Once you got out, I would have taken care of you for the rest of your life." Lucas stared at her, horrified by her complete lack of moral foundation. He yanked his hands out of her grip and shoved her toward the front door. "Get out of my house." Chapter 9. The Public Rejection. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria lost everything. Her reputation in the business community was shattered. Her assets were frozen pending civil lawsuits from investors, and Marcus remained locked in a detention center awaiting trial. Having nowhere else to go, Victoria began camping outside Lucas's apartment door every day. She brought containers of homemade porridge, trying to play the humble, repentant wife. "Lucas, look, I learned how to cook your breakfast. Please, just open the door." When Lucas stepped out to run errands, she blocked his path, tears streaming down her face. "Our divorce was just a temporary arrangement. You promised you'd help Marcus, and then we'd remarry." Lucas looked down at her coldly. "I signed the divorce papers because I wanted to end our marriage. I never once said I agreed to remarry you." Seeing that her emotional pleas were failing, Victoria followed him across the city as he began traveling to various scenic towns to produce content for his booming travel channel. One afternoon, while Lucas was setting up his camera along a crowded ocean boardwalk, Victoria suddenly appeared in front of the crowd. She was wearing a delicate white dress he had bought her for her birthday years ago, holding a massive bouquet of red roses. She dropped to her knees in front of hundreds of tourists, looking at him with wide, tearful eyes. "Lucas, will you marry me again? I've cut all ties with Marcus. I don't care about anything else anymore. I just want you back." The surrounding crowd, assuming this was a romantic proposal, began to cheer and clap, shouting, "Say yes! Say yes!" Lucas stood in the middle of the circle, looking at her without a trace of warmth. 7 years ago, he had knelt in a crowded restaurant with a ring he had saved up for months to buy, proposing to her with absolute devotion. Back then, Victoria had looked annoyed and embarrassed, snatching the ring and whispering bitterly, "Hurry up and stand up. You're embarrassing me in public." Later, he had found a page in her old college diary where she wrote that her ultimate dream was for Marcus to propose to her in public. Now, the grand public proposal he had once dreamed of was happening, but it felt utterly meaningless. Lucas looked down at her. "There is nothing between us worth remarrying for. Stand up and stop making a scene." He turned on his heel and walked away through the crowd, leaving her kneeling alone on the pavement. Chapter 10. Repayment and a New Dawn. Victoria chased after him, grabbing his arm as he reached his hotel. "Why are you being so heartless?" she sobbed. "You loved me for 10 years. How can you just erase that?" Lucas stopped and looked her dead in the eye. "Because for 10 years, I gave you my absolute best, and you treated me like trash. You aborted my child for Marcus. You gave me leftovers. You made me eat food I was allergic to. You ignored my existence until you had no one else left." Victoria's face turned pale. I can change. Let's go to your hometown together right now. We can visit your parents' graves, and I'll apologize to them. My parents wouldn't want to see you." Lucas replied evenly. "Then let me cook for you tonight. I'll go buy that spinach you love." "I am deathly allergic to spinach, Victoria," Lucas interrupted sharply. "I have been allergic to it since the day I met you." Victoria gasped, a look of horrifying realization washing over her face as she recalled the dinner table from weeks ago. I really forgot. Lucas, I'm sorry." Just then, Victoria's phone rang. It was Marcus's defense attorney calling from the police station. On the other end, Marcus's frantic, weeping voice bled through the speaker. "Victoria, please, you have to sell your apartment and hire a high-powered legal team for me. If you don't save me, I'm going to spend 10 years in prison. I promise I'll love you forever if you save me." Victoria looked at the phone, then looked at Lucas's cold, unyielding face. A sudden wave of clarity hit her. Marcus had used her, ruined her career, destroyed her marriage, and was still demanding she sacrifice her final remaining assets for him. "Marcus," Victoria said, her voice dropping into a cold, flat register. "You abandoned me once in college, and you dragged me into crime this time. Figure it out yourself. Never call me again." She hung up and blocked his number forever. She turned back to Lucas, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. "Lucas, I've completely cut him off now. I swear it. You once said you wanted to climb Mount Tai to watch the sunrise together. Let's go tomorrow morning. Just give me one last chance." Lucas looked at her quietly for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. Tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. at the hotel lobby." Victoria's face lit up with overwhelming joy. She wiped her tears, beaming. That night, she posted a photo of Lucas's side profile on her social media account with the caption, "Learning to cook his favorite meals. Starting over with my husband." Early the next morning at 4:30 a.m., Victoria dressed in her finest clothes, holding a hot breakfast she had spent hours preparing, and sat waiting in the hotel lobby. 5 a.m. came and went. Then 7 a.m. Then 10 a.m. At 11 a.m., after waiting 5 agonizing hours on the lobby sofa with her legs entirely numb, her phone finally connected to Lucas's line. "Lucas," she cried out, her voice cracking with exhaustion and distress. "Where are you? I've been sitting in the lobby waiting for you for 5 hours. Do you know how foolish I look?" From the speaker, the roar of a jet engine played quietly in the background. Lucas was sitting comfortably in a first-class seat on a flight heading to Europe. "Now we're even," Lucas said calmly over the receiver. "Years ago, I set up a tent on top of that mountain and waited in the freezing cold all night for you to watch the sunrise. You stood me up to go drinking with Marcus, and when I came home, you scolded me for not making you breakfast. Those 5 hours in the lobby are just a small down payment on what you owe me." Victoria froze, her breath catching in her throat as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Lucas, please, have a good life, Victoria," Lucas said softly. He hung up the phone, pulled out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped it into the trash receptacle beside his seat. As the plane soared into the clouds, Lucas leaned back, closed his eyes, and welcomed his new dawn. Chapter 11. The Fresh Canvas. 2 years passed after Lucas boarded that flight overseas. In that time, he built an entirely new life from scratch, traveling through Europe and documenting hidden cultural gems, local cuisines, and serene landscapes. His travel channel skyrocketed in popularity, transforming him into one of the most respected independent content creators in the industry. More importantly, he used the remaining capital from his asset settlement to invest in an ecotourism project in a coastal European village, building a peaceful boutique lodge surrounded by lush gardens and the sea. For the first time in his life, Lucas was truly happy. He wasn't working himself to exhaustion for someone else's approval, nor was he walking on eggshells. He had made genuine friends, rediscovered his passion for photography, and built a peaceful routine filled with crisp morning air, fresh coffee, and meaningful work. One evening, while attending an international digital media summit where he was invited as a keynote speaker, Lucas ran into Daniel, who had flown in from home. They sat together at a seaside cafe, catching up on old times over a quiet drink. Curious, Lucas casually asked about the past, and Daniel gave him a brief update. Marcus had been convicted of major financial fraud and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Victoria, stripped of her position and ruined by investor lawsuits, had been forced to sell most of her property to pay off corporate debts. She was now working a low-level administrative job at a small logistics firm, living a quiet, obscure life in a rented apartment, permanently haunted by the empire and the man she had thrown away. "Does she ever try to find you?" Daniel asked softly. Lucas took a sip of his drink and looked out at the sun setting over the water. "I wouldn't know," he smiled gently. "My old life belongs to a completely different person." Chapter 12. A Morning of Sunshine. Spring arrived in the coastal village, bringing warm sea breezes and blooming wildflowers. Lucas had just finished hosting a photography workshop at his lodge when a talented young architect named Clara, who had collaborated with him on designing the lodge's sunlit courtyard, walked up to the terrace carrying a tray. "I brought something for breakfast," Clara said with a warm, genuine smile, placing a plate of freshly baked berry scones and hot coffee on the table. "Don't worry, I double-checked every ingredient. No spinach anywhere near this kitchen." Lucas laughed softly, a bright, easy sound that echoed across the patio. Clara knew his preferences, respected his boundaries, and appreciated him for exactly who he was without ever demanding sacrifices or playing emotional games. Over the past year, their quiet mutual respect had naturally blossomed into a deep, steady affection built on equality and genuine care. Clara sat down beside him, handing him a cup of coffee. "What are your plans for tomorrow morning?" Lucas looked at her, his eyes filled with absolute peace. "I was thinking we could hike up the coastal cliff before dawn and watch the sunrise." "I'd love that," Clara replied softly, leaning her head gently against his shoulder. "I'll pack the coffee, and I won't be a minute late." The next morning, high up on the coastal cliff as the darkness yielded to golden light, Lucas stood side by side with Clara, watching the sun rise over the endless ocean horizon. There was no bitterness left in his heart, no heavy baggage from the past. Only the warmth of the morning sun and a bright, beautiful future stretching out before him. Chapter 13. The Golden Horizon. A year later, Lucas's boutique lodge had become a world-renowned haven for travelers seeking peace, art, and natural beauty. The coastal village flourished alongside his business, creating jobs for locals and fostering a vibrant community of creators and nature lovers. Lucas was no longer just surviving or rebuilding, he was thriving in every sense of the word. On a crisp autumn afternoon, a package arrived at the lodge from a major international media association. Lucas had been awarded Travel Documentary Creator of the Year for a feature series he had directed, showcasing hidden coastal ecosystems and sustainable living. The recognition was a proud moment, but what filled his heart most was looking across the sunlit courtyard to see Clara hanging new hand-framed photographs from their recent travels together. That evening, the local community and guests at the lodge gathered in the courtyard for an impromptu celebration. Friends, neighbors, and travelers toasted to Lucas's success, filling the air with laughter, music, and genuine warmth. Surrounded by people who loved and respected him for his kind heart and talent, Lucas felt a profound sense of fulfillment he had never known in his past life. Later, as the guests settled in and the music softened into a gentle melody, Clara took Lucas's hand, leading him down to the wooden dock overlooking the quiet bay. The sky was painting itself in deep shades of violet and gold as the sun dipped toward the water. Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, elegantly crafted wooden box she had designed herself. Inside rested a simple, beautifully carved silver band engraved with the coastline of their village. "Lucas," she said, looking into his eyes with unwavering devotion and clarity. "You spent so many years giving everything you had to someone who didn't know your worth. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to doubt yours. Will you build a family and a home with me?" Lucas looked at the ring, then at Clara's radiant, honest smile. There were no manipulative games, no hidden motives, and no shadows from the past. Only pure, mutual love built on respect and shared dreams. A soft, bright smile spread across his face as he took the ring. "Yes, Clara," he whispered, pulling her into a warm, effortless embrace. "With all my heart." As the stars began to appear above the tranquil ocean, Lucas held Clara close, knowing with absolute certainty that his true story had finally begun. A story filled with light, laughter, and a love that would last a lifetime.